Our last and final question for this week's episode comes from Lauren in Los Angeles, California. She asks, I'm in my 30s and I feel like making friends as an adult is so hard. My old friends are busy with kids, careers, or live far away. I want deeper, meaningful friendships, not just surface level connections, but I don't know how to find them without feeling awkward or desperate. How do adults build real friendships again? Ugh, Lauren, this is so relatable. I literally feel this on so many levels. When I moved from California to Colorado, I literally was like, oh my God, I forgot that it's so hard to meet people as an adult. It's hard. So here's what I hear you asking. How do I cultivate deep, authentic friendships as an adult when life feels so busy and isolating? And I think it's the reason I laugh and I find a little bit of humor in this is just because it's a tender and relatable question. I think so many people in their 30s and their 40s and beyond feel this way. I think making adults as friends, I think making friends as adults is way harder than it is when we were kids because you've got schedules, responsibilities, and even distance. Like the 2 years that I've lived here in Colorado, my closest friends lived far away, and that was really hard for me when I just wanted to, get out and go have fun and go do something. And it's like, don't really know anyone who would do those things with me here. So I just want to normalize the longing, that wanting depth and authenticity, and also being human and having responsibilities. You wanting that deep kind of authenticity and connection, it absolutely does not make you needy. So I just want to not that I really heard that, but maybe I'm just projecting my own sense a little bit. But anyone that's looking for deep authenticity and connection is not needy. It's literally them trying to meet their biological and emotional, psychological human needs. Belonging and connection are core needs. I will say it forever. If you don't believe me, go watch literally anything about Dr. Gabor Mate, who has so much science-backed data behind this. This is as children, we have basic needs: belonging, connection, authenticity, and love. These are all things that we need. And then when we get older, all of a sudden we're like, maybe I don't need those things anymore because I can get this from here and this from here. And it's like, are we filling voids or are we getting real connection? So I want to speak to the vulnerability in that because, again, this is very relatable. It takes courage to admit loneliness, but I think what takes even more courage is to reach out and look for new connections. And I'll share a little bit of my personal experience with this. I was very grateful that when I first moved to Colorado, I met my wonderful neighbor, and we had this great connection right off the bat. And it was really wonderful for me to feel like I had people to connect with. She introduced me to her friends. I joined book club. It was great. I was like, oh my gosh, yay, friends, And then all of a sudden my life took this crazy turn. My brother-in-law passed away tragically in an accident. I got very, very sick for the last 2 years. I went through some emotional ups and downs and was battling some feelings of depression again. I was just not in the mood to socially connect with people. I was way more focused on my relationship and my health and my inner well-being. And it's as soon as I found a little bit of that connection, it was like the rug was pulled from underneath me. And I was like, wow, okay, apparently this chapter of my life is not about friendship. And that was really hard for me. And when I received your question, what I started thinking about is this really interesting way that I think life works. Because in childhood, I think childhood friendships, when they're formed, they're formed through things like school. You sit next to someone at school, or your sports teams, or, your parents are friends. A lot of childhood friendships, I think up until high school, are really formed around some really specific scenarios that children are kind of not forced into, but they're just naturally in all of the time. So making friends is a huge part of that time of our lives. And then we get older, and adult friendships, we start to realize, require so much more intentionality. You have to be focused on having friendships when you're an adult, because you may be siloed in an office or working from home or in a relationship where your energy is going to one person instead of maybe 5 people. But there are chapters of our lives where friendships are at the pinnacle, the apex. They're so important to us. And I remember that there were chapters of my life where I had 15 friends. I had so many friends. I was wealthy with friends. I was so blessed and grateful that I could call any one of these people at any time, and we could go out and have fun, and we could do so many different things. That there was so much there were so many dynamics in terms of that friend group, and I still love them, but I'm not as close with them today as I was when I was in my early to mid 20s because my life is just different now. Arguably, all of our lives are different now. So you might be somebody that loves throwing clay or pottery. So you might want to join once a week or once every couple weeks a pottery class. Or maybe you're somebody who's deep on the healing journey and you want to join a coda group or something where it's a group of people, and this could be even a woman's circle, like, but just like a free resource or like low cost resource where you can join a group of people who are like-minded on the things that you're moving through in those areas of your life. I think it's completely normal that everyone feels a little bit awkward at first, that you're just meeting these people for the first time. Sometimes you're figuring out where and how you fit in with people. It doesn't mean that you're failing. It doesn't mean that you're a bad friend. It just means that you're navigating a sometimes intimidating situation. And it's nice to have people who are warm and loving and inclusive who can bring you into the fold of a new environment. So with new friendships, we're getting to know a whole new human that we don't even really understand yet. No, we all come from different backgrounds. We all are fueled by different things. We're all shaped by different things. Maybe you have overlapping interests with people, but you might not be sure what else to lean on the conversation. I remember, there's just joining a book club was great because it was interesting. Like I wasn't really a big fiction reader, but when I joined the book club, I like really wanted to make friends, and we had to read a book, to like be a part of this like book club. And I'm naturally very introverted, so this is a very extroverted group. What we did all have in common is that there was a willingness to work towards a goal together, which is reading the book and discussing it. And so the overlapping interests that we all had was maybe not me, reading the fiction book, which I eventually learned to love because now I read all the time. But it was the overlapping interest of like, we're all coming together to talk about something and like, have a meeting of the minds about something. And I love that shit. Even if they didn't believe it to be that, like I loved that. So that was my overlapping interest. And I loved being able to sit around food and chat and talk. And, I was shy and introverted, but, and intimidated. I was very intimidated. I was just like, oh my God, like, I don't, these people have known each other for so long. I'm new here. Are they going to like me? Are they not going to like me? And then you share what you do for work and you're like, I don't know if people are going to like me. And so, but you just lean in, you try to find overlapping interests, and, eventually maybe you find really deep connection with one person or two people. You don't have to be friends with everybody, but, you find the people that you can find that depth with. But first, it means putting yourself in situations that you have to lean in, have some courage, and you might feel a little uncomfortable. I think one of the most valuable tools that you can have when navigating a first friend date or just getting to know someone is to be a really good question asker. I'm making up that word, but I think it's relevant. When I met Tyler, my fiance, by the time this comes out, he'll almost be my husband, which is kind of crazy to think about. But what I loved the most about him was his natural curiosity about people. And what really made me feel so seen and heard by him was his ability to ask me questions, some meaningful, some surface level, but just being curious about me. And as somebody who tends to be a little bit more guarded and introverted at times with people that I'm first getting to know, I had to challenge myself to open up. And there was this interesting point in when we were dating. Right before we started dating, we were sitting at the fireplace in our apartment complex where we met. And I could feel that he wanted to go deeper emotionally with me. And I wasn't sure. I was nervous. I wanted that depth, but I wasn't really sure if I should show myself, my parts. And he said, you think that you're being vulnerable with me, but you're actually not. And I can feel that you're guarded. And I'll never forget, he called me the fuck out. And I was like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing because I really like this guy and I want to meet him in this way. And so you might have to be the person who's curious and willing to ask questions and receive parts of people, even if you may not always agree. And I think that it's wonderful to have friends who we don't always agree with and agree with everything that you say. I think it gives depth. I think it gives character. As long as friendships can remain civil and kind and respectful and loving, I think it's important to have friends of all different viewpoints. But you want to make sure that you can connect with them on those things, especially if they're things that are deep and you want that deep connection. So you can join groups and join classes, and you can volunteer, and you can lean into that stuff. Be a good question asker. Share parts of yourself, share the values, especially if you're looking for something deep. Sharing your values with someone creates natural bonding, I think. I also think you could find depth in places like yoga studios, but then there's also places where you could just meet people and become friends with them in a very surface level way. Like when I moved to Denver, I had my neighbor, and she was kind enough to share her friends with me, but I became friends with the women who did my facials and my hair and my brows and my spray tans. And because I would see them so regularly, I probably saw them more regularly than anyone else, because they're just like maintenance things. And eventually we developed friendships, and we'd go on walks outside of the services together, and we'd, text and chat and share things with each other. And I'd get a lot of one-on-one time with them. So I feel like you end up sharing a lot of things with them too that can get kind of deep. So it's nice to get a social fix from that too. But yeah. And I think too, besides the question asking thing, like I think most relationships of all kind are built in micro moments. So like text check-ins, or, do you want to go walk together? Do you want to go to this yoga class together? Small rituals, once the first Monday of every month, you guys meet for coffee and you guys commit to it. And little things I call I thought of yous, which I think is really cute in a friendship, of just like, oh, I heard this podcast and I thought of you, or I read this article and I thought of you, or, the pinnacle of like sharing memes on Instagram and social media like that. I think that's what makes social media so fun. Like I said, I left two of my really good friends in San Diego, and half of our friendship maintenance over the last 2 years has been hilarious and like meaningful things on Instagram and social media, which has been nice. So I think it's okay to be like, especially if you're looking for depth, I think it's okay to be the first one that reaches out. I don't think it makes you desperate. I think it makes you intentional. But, if you notice you're the only one who's reaching out all the time and there's not a lot of reciprocity, I wouldn't assume the worst of people. Remember that people may be going through things that they haven't shared, or maybe they don't feel comfortable sharing, or they're embarrassed, or who knows what people are going through. It could be so simple and truly have nothing to do with you. And I would say most of the time it doesn't. So yeah, but you could always take space if you find yourself to be the only person reaching out. Just could be that it's chapters are changing. And I think that's important to remember, is some chapters of our lives, we're going to have so much room and time and capacity and energy for friendships, and we can lean in and we can do all the fun things, and we can keep up with the demands of a friendship, because, all relationships, they have expectations or demands, there's a give and take, and we share, we talk, or we catch up or whatever. When those things start dwindling away, that we feel like, where is the friendship? Where is the connection? But yeah, you're not desperate if you keep reaching out. Just notice the reciprocity of it. On a soul level, I kind of want to just like touch on this too. If you're feeling like the friendships in your lives on a soul level are not nourishing for you, you could try something out there and different. And this is probably out there and different for a lot of people, but for me, it's something that is really resonant for my own spiritual practice. You could write a letter to spirit. You could meditate on this. You could just set the intention in your heart that you want to be in connection, and you want to meet and be surrounded by soul family, soul friends, people who nourish your soul. You may not see them every single day. You may only see them once a month, but when you see them, it nourishes that part of your spirit that's looking for friendship and connection. So I think there's that practice as well that you could do. I think too, when we get into like our 30s, we start redefining what friendships feel like and look like. And so yeah, adult friendships, they may not look like sleepovers or daily hangouts or going to the club, or, having a really consistent routine of seeing each other. But I still think it can be deeply nourishing and steady and real. And I say this about family systems a lot, and I'll say it for friendships too, but like sometimes when we are changing as humans, this feels a little intuitive too, so take it for how it lands for you, Lauren, but when we're changing and evolving and growing as humans, the way that we relate to other people could also drastically change. And so, including our families. So, I always tell people like, if you don't want to connect with your family on politics, then do not engage in the conversations of politics. Don't engage and find something else, cooking, nostalgia, music, anything else other than, but there's so many things you could get into besides politics. So like you're always in charge of the way that you respond. And so if you're seeing yourself in friendships where you are frustrated or challenged by the way that you're connecting, see if you can find another way. And people's reciprocity to your questions and your interests will show you the depth at which they're willing to go or not. And if they're not willing to go into that depth, it has nothing to do with you, probably has more to do with their inability or their fear or their lack of being able to go within themselves. And that can say a lot about how we move forward with them. Okay, so 3 wildly different questions this week. Wildly different questions. But that's it for today's conversation with the Heal with Kat show.